Okay, so I'm going to give an overview on King Digital Lab, which is the lab where I work, approach to archiving and sustainability, some information about context, practices, and challenges. So currently I am the director of the lab, but I'm also a senior research software analyst in the team, as introduced in a moment ago. So I'll say, first of all, something about the context, because I think it's important. Indeed, each institution has its own history and its own reasons to get into the challenges of sustainability and archiving. I will also say something about software development life cycle that hopefully will show how we work and how things are integrated within that cycle. And then finally, I will conclude with some information about our monitoring methods and in particular, governance around archiving and sustainability. So first of all, digital humanities at King's as a brief history, if we look at the long durée, but actually a long history if we compare it to digital humanities and humanities computing. And this is important because it means that we have a legacy related to that work. So I'll be brief, but I think important to say that some of that, the work in humanities computing and application of computational methods to the humanities and art humanities at King started already around the 1970s. There have been several iterations of different centers that came together, working in that area, becoming more and more specialized until in the early 2000s, a Department of Digital Humanities was created, which is now a very, very healthy department with over 1,000 students, master's and undergraduate degrees, PhD program, and over 70 members of staff working there. At the same time, because of that long history, the Faculty of Arts and Humanities decided that it was useful in 2015 to create a separate unit from the academic departments, which, as I said, still exists and still takes care of a lot of teaching and research activities, which is what is now the King's Digital Lab. So the lab is a research software engineering unit, as I said, operational since 2015. There's 13 of us, 12 of us have permanent contracts. And as you can see from the roles descriptions there, ours are not traditional academic roles, but indeed research software roles of different kinds. So from engineering role to lab and project managers, UI UX designers, system managers. And then in addition to the core staff, depending on the projects we work in or the activities, we might have postdocs, research affiliates, visiting students and fellows associated with the work of the lab. We have quite a robust infrastructure, which we're currently migrating to central OpenStack architectures in the college. Roughly, we manage around 120 digital projects. So this is what it means, digital humanities at scale. It's really quite a lot of resources. Part of these resources, a big part of these resources have been inherited from those years that I mentioned before of activities around creating mainly web resources, but not only applying computational methods to research. We are supported by external funding, so we need to bring in research funding. But the good thing is that there is quite an important investment from our faculty, so we are underwritten internally, and this is why we can offer, or we've been offered permanent roles within the staff. To give you an idea, last year we worked on around, last financial year, we did some technical work on around 30 funded projects, 60 post projects, so that's where the archiving and sustainability element comes in. So this means that these were projects that had already finished their funding cycles, but they still required care and maintenance. This is the team. So as I said, well, maybe I didn't say it, there's kind of two sub-teams, that what we call the lab support teams that kind of enables the work, the core work of the lab. And then there is a software development team with analysts, engineers, system administrators. Sorry, I have to move the chat so I can see my screen, and designers. So this is so that was the context. So if I move a little bit towards processes, so we have a rather flexible light software development life cycle that it's mapped to roughly to an agile DSDM framework, and more specifically is adapted to a research context. So how do we work on projects? Normally a partner get in touch with us, we assess the original idea, we try to see if it's feasible, it matches our expertise, if we have capacity, if it falls under other, let's say, broadly strategic criteria. And if that's the case, then we move into a requirement assessment phase where an analyst is associated to that project. Usually people come to us without funding, so we work together to get that funding. If the project is funded, there's a kickoff with a sub-team, typically including an analyst, a developer, and a designer. We enter the evolutionary development phase, which is obviously done in cycles of different iterations. Some projects are very small. They might last only a couple of months. Some last over 5 years, so it depends. Typically, there'll be different phases of deployments, typically in a public environment, but more and more often now also in private environment or in processing pipelines of different kind. And then with a lot of our, if you like, traditional digital humanities project, we have also public release or some kind of web presence. And then there is the post-project phase, as I said, when the projects basically enter its post-funding period. What's important, I think, for the discussions today is that each of these phases is documented in what we called our governance document, if you like. These are templates that we use to kind of assist the cycle of the project. So from a terms of reference at the beginning, that gives a very high-level idea of what the project idea is about, to a feasibility document, which is much more detailed, product quote when we get to the point of estimating the cost of our time in that work. And then obviously we keep track of how the project progresses when the project is live, is active in the project review record. And then typically, if we have to maintain some kind of public or not necessarily public resource, we also have an SLA, a service level agreement template with costs associated to that. And or we might have the commission authorization document that kind of authorizes different options for the commissioning a resource that might not be needed or that can be archived and so on. I'll say a bit more about the different options in a minute. What's interesting, the reason why I'm saying this is that obviously the SLA and the DOCOM authorization document are the documents, if you like, where more details about the archiving and sustainability options maintenance, let's say, is described. But in actual fact, discussions around the post-project cycle start very early on, already in the terms of reference discussions with partners, and then indeed in assessing feasibility in product quote. Just to say that, yeah, the integration of research data management is across different phases of that project life cycle. So from what we call pre-project, so when a project isn't even funded and there is a phase of early conceptualization and definition, all the way to foundations, evolutionary development, where things really start kicking in and you realize that there might be features, functionalities you weren't expecting before that might require to be sustained in certain ways that you weren't expecting, to release and post-project phases. Obviously, those research data management methods depend a lot on the scope and size of the projects. I don't want to spend too much time, but to give you an idea, for example, at pre-project phase, these are some of the things that define or where the discussion around sustainability takes place already from the very, very first meetings with partners, that feasibility and assessment review process, where sometimes we also get to see sample data and start prioritizing requirements. And then indeed the product quote, which usually also include an outline of the service level agreement if we know already that we will need to maintain something to sustain some kind of components for that project. And then obviously more and more funders also require data management plans of different kinds. So at that pre-project phase, we already have to outline the approaches that we are trying to take. And then of course the criteria, again, to kind of define those methods depend on different things, size and type of the project, heterogeneity of data, processes, applications, provenance, copyright, and licensing of data, and so on. These are all the different things that come into play, compatibility with the software stack that we use, and workflows, and so on. That's all well. I mean, we can all try and do good practices and engage in this discussion really earlier on in the project, but in actual fact, we also all know that things change as the project starts. And those same research data system management practices need to change, right, as the project goes on. So we need to continuously reflect on iteration and data workflows and ask partners and discuss with partners some of the questions that you have here. So for example, what kind of data type, format, and size are you expecting to create? end or process in your project or research, and so on. So it could be a lot of things that emerge also as the project progresses, and the requirements in terms of sustainability might change. So what are the kind of, let me move again, something on my screen so I can see the title of my slide. My God, this is a bit annoying. So what are the post-project options that I mentioned as part of the decommissioning phase that we propose to partners? They're sketched here roughly. So there are 5 options, and they're not mutually exclusive, so they can go in pair. More often than not, for a lot of the resources we produce, the maintenance under a costed service level agreement is the norm. This is mainly also because of the funders that we work with. So in the UK, for example, the Research Council has a mandate. You have to, if you produce a digital resource of some kind that is of public use, you need to maintain it at least for 3 years after the project is finished. So typically our SLAs will be already costed for 5 years. We also obviously have the option to migrate whatever we produced, either to central services in the college or outside, and we do a lot of that as well. A quite convenient option is to also convert, for example, a website, a web resource into static. These days, our stack is actually being improved a lot. So we already start usually with static development that facilitates and makes the resources more sustainable in the future, more modular, but also leaner to maintain. We can obviously also deposit the data set, and we have different options for that, including our institutional repository at King's College London. And then obviously, if you like the more basic kind of archiving and sustainability is what we call minimal archiving and storage, where we keep the project website or the virtual machines for a minimum of 2 years. And usually there's a placeholder page where the public domain name was, that gives some information about that archiving process and what was there before. But all these you can find on our website, which, by the way, we're in the process of updating soon. I think I have a few slides also about the service level agreement template, which I thought might be useful for some people. So all our project templates are public, so you'll find them at that address there. The SDLC wiki that we produce include both some guidance on how to use our templates, but also the templates themselves. So here, for example, you see some examples specifically focused on a website of the kind of things that you would want to ask the people you work with if you need to take care of some of these components that you're developing. And then you should see also an example of the actual SLA templates with cost and how it could be formatted. So we kind of put those there for others to use, adapt, and critique. One last thing I wanted to say, if I've got still a little bit of time, is about our monitoring method. So I mentioned our SDLC. With the previous director of KDL, James Meathys, we tried to conceptualize a little bit the methods around our software development lifecycle. And basically what we're discussing here are mainly what we call our maintain methods, so the post-project phase. This is a bit of a scary slide, but what I wanted to say is that at the moment, the way that we decide whether we do maintain something or not, for how long, so this process is cyclical and is also now managed by a special SLA committee, so also outside the lab itself. So obviously the lab makes recommendations and we have specific criteria that we define with faculty, but we also, to a certain extent, delegate some of those decisions because they have a lot of financial implications, as I think the colleague before me was also hinting at, in terms of resources and cost. So it looks quite complex, but it's basically to say that we reflected around these things a lot, and we now have a process to go through, manage, make recommendations, and therefore give a sense of the fact that, first of all, you need the people to support these things in addition to the infrastructure cost, and it's good to be transparent and have those make explicit. And I think this is it for me. Thank you, and obviously happy to hear any questions you might have.